Across abandoned bunkers, sunken warships, and golden treasure, history left thousands of fingerprints scattered across the earth, and most of them are still out there waiting. Some of these places were sealed so deliberately that whoever closed the door clearly never wanted anyone to open it again. Join us, and let's discover the most haunting forgotten relics ever found on land and beneath the sea. Let's go.
Number 13. Edouard Bolin. Fog swallowed the coastline of Namibia on September 5, 1909, and the cargo schemer Edouard Bolin drove straight into a sandbank she never saw coming. The 95-meter ship had been running from Swakopmund toward Cape Town, loaded and on schedule, when the skeleton coast reached up and grabbed her. The crew survived. The ship did not. What happened next is the part that stops people cold. The desert started moving. Slowly, grain by grain, the dunes marched west toward the Atlantic, burying the wreck in dry sand mile after mile. Today, the Edouard Bolin sits nearly 300 meters inland, stranded in an ocean of dust with no water in sight. To stand next to her now, you would never guess this rusting skeleton once floated. Picture a full-sized cargo ship dropped into the middle of the Sahara and left to bleach white under the sun for over a century. The skeleton coast earned its name from the bones of whales and sailors washed ashore here, and the Bolin became one more victim added to that grim tally. Sailors who pass this stretch of Namibia still talk about how the fog comes without warning, how the currents pull ships toward the shore like a hand closing around them, and how more than 1,000 wrecks lie scattered along this single coastline, each one with a story nobody fully recorded.
Number 12. Mauerwald. Hidden in the forests near Mamerki, Poland, sits a concrete city built for the men who planned a war. Mauerwald was the command complex of the German High Command during the Second World War, raised in 1941 beside Lake Mamre, and it was no small outpost. Around 250 buildings and bunkers were buried in these woods, walls thick enough to shrug off a direct hit, designed so that the people inside could keep issuing orders even as the world burned around them. Part of the complex is a museum now, with underground tunnels and exhibits you can walk through. The rest was simply abandoned, left to the moss and the cold, doors hanging open for anyone brave enough to step inside. That is exactly what draws explorers here. Some of these bunkers were so heavily reinforced that demolition crews after the war gave up trying to bring them down. The concrete was meant to outlast the regime that poured it, and it did. Walking these corridors today, your footsteps echo off walls that once carried the voices of generals, and the silence presses in from every direction. The forest has been quietly reclaiming the place for 80 years, roots cracking through the floors, water pooling in rooms that once buzzed with maps and radios. And somewhere in that maze of identical gray chambers, there are still sections nobody has fully cataloged, locked behind steel that hasn't moved since the 1940s.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Number 11. Costa Rica Stone Spheres. Around 300 of them lie scattered across Costa Rica, perfectly round stone balls ranging from a few centimeters wide to monsters 3 meters across, and nobody can agree on how they were made. Scientists credit the ancient Dikis culture, carving them roughly 4,000 years ago using tools and techniques that should have made such flawless spheres nearly impossible. The precision is what keeps the arguments alive. Some of these stones are so close to mathematically perfect that even with modern equipment, reproducing them by hand would be brutally difficult. So how did a people without metal tools or wheels grind granite into shapes this exact? That question has never been fully answered. Plenty of people refuse to accept the official explanation at all, insisting the spheres came from somewhere far beyond Costa Rica. Many were found in deliberate arrangements, lined up or grouped in patterns that hinted at astronomical alignments, but farmers and treasure hunters moved most of them long before archaeologists could map their original positions. That destruction erased whatever message the spheres were meant to spell out. We have the stones, we have the culture that probably carved them, and we have almost nothing connecting the two. The people who made them left no writing, no instructions, no explanation for why they spent generations turning solid rock into giant marbles, then placed them across the jungle for reasons that died with them.
Number 10. Gilgal Rephaim. A pilot flying over the Golan Heights in 1967 looked down and saw something that shouldn't exist, a massive wheel of stone carved into the earth. From the ground, it had been invisible for thousands of years, just scattered rocks. From the air, it snapped into focus. 5 concentric stone rings, the outermost stretching 152 meters across, with a burial chamber rising 5 meters at the dead center. Gilgal Rephaim, the Wheel of Giants. Its builders stacked an estimated 40,000 tons of basalt to create it, roughly 5,000 years ago, making it older than the pyramids at Giza. And they did it without leaving a single clue about why. There are no bodies in the central tomb that match the scale of the construction. There are no inscriptions. The local name itself translates to the Wheel of Giants, born from old stories of a race of beings large enough to lift these stones into place. On certain days, the structure aligns with the sunrise, which suggests it tracked the seasons or the stars. But a calendar this enormous makes little sense for the small farming communities living nearby at the time. Standing inside the rings, you are surrounded by walls of black rock that someone hauled here by hand, stone by stone, for a purpose that vanished completely. And the deeper archaeologists dig into who built it, the more the timeline refuses to add up. Number 9. Kipta Peak Ghost Fleet. Off Kipta Peak, Virginia, 9 ships made of solid concrete sit half-drowned in the shallows, and the story of why is stranger than any shipwreck. During the Second World War, the United States was so short on steel that engineers did the unthinkable and built cargo vessels out of reinforced concrete. They actually floated. They actually crossed oceans carrying supplies, which seems to defy every instinct about what a ship should be made of. After the war, these concrete giants had outlived their purpose. So in 1948, someone made a cold, practical decision. They dragged 9 of them to Chesapeake Bay and sank them in a line to form a breakwater, a wall of dead ships protecting a ferry terminal from the storms rolling in off the Atlantic. Nearly 80 years later, they are still there, gray hulls cracking and crumbling, draped in seaweed and bird droppings, a ghost fleet frozen mid-decay in the water. Birds nest in the gaps now, fish hide in the flooded holes. From a distance, they look almost like a natural reef, until you get close and realize you are staring at a row of warships deliberately killed and left to rot in formation. The concrete that let them sail is the same concrete slowly pulling them apart. And once they finally collapse, that strange chapter of wartime desperation will sink out of sight for good. Number 8. Socotra T-34 tanks. On the beaches of Socotra, an island so remote it looks like another planet, Soviet T-34 tanks sit half-buried in the sand, pointing their guns out at an empty sea. The USSR shipped them here in the 1970s as a gift to South Yemen, and the locals dug them into the ground along the coast as a defense line against an invasion that never came. So they waited. Decades passed. The enemy never arrived. The war they were placed here for faded into history, and the tanks simply stayed, turning from weapons into landmarks. Socotra is already one of the strangest places on Earth, covered in dragon's blood trees that look like alien umbrellas and species found nowhere else on the planet. And now these rusting steel hulks are part of that bizarre landscape. Salt air has been chewing through their armor for 50 years. Sand fills their interiors. Children climb on them. Tourists who make the difficult journey to the island photograph them against sunsets that belong on a postcard. There is something deeply unsettling about a machine built to kill, frozen forever in a posture of readiness, aimed at nothing. These tanks were the cutting edge of armored warfare once, the same model that turned the tide on the Eastern Front,
and now they sit abandoned on a beach at the edge of the world, slowly becoming part of the sand itself. Deep inside a crumbling assembly building at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, explorers found something the world was supposed to forget: an entire abandoned rocket. The Energia M, a scaled-down version of the Soviet Super Heavy launcher, built to throw 30 to 35 tons into orbit, left standing in the dark like a corpse nobody bothered to bury. Its tests ran from 1989 to 1991. The first launch was scheduled for 1994. Then, just 1 year before it was meant to fly, the entire program was killed, and the rocket that engineers had poured years of work into was simply left where it stood. To grasp the scale, this thing was built to lift the weight of a fully loaded semi-truck and its cargo all the way past the edge of the atmosphere. It was supposed to be part of the future. Instead, it became a relic of a collapsing empire, sealed inside a building where the roof leaks and the floor is buried in debris. The men who walked in to film it described an eerie sense of standing next to a giant that fell asleep mid-stride. Birds have moved into the rafters, dust coats every surface, and there it sits, a fully assembled spacecraft that never touched space, abandoned the moment the country that built it ran out of money and time, its nose still pointing toward a sky it would never reach.
Number 6. Sunken Truck Graveyard. Divers swimming far from any shoreline dropped into deep water and found something that made no sense at all. Rows of trucks resting on the seafloor, as if someone had carefully arranged them down there. Not one or two, a whole graveyard of vehicles, lined up in the dark where no road could ever reach. The arrangement is what makes your skin crawl. These weren't scattered like debris from an accident or a ship that went down. They looked placed, deliberately sunk, the kind of thing you do when you want something to disappear and never resurface. The most obvious explanation is the one nobody wants to say out loud, that someone dumped them here to destroy evidence, betting that the ocean would keep the secret forever. Down at that depth, there is no current to move them, no scavengers large enough to scatter them, just cold, still water and silence. Fish drift through the empty cabs now. Rust blooms across the metal in slow motion. Whoever drove these trucks to whatever ramp or barge sent them under did the math and decided this was the safest place on Earth to hide them. And the diver who found them surfaced with footage, but no answers, because the people who could explain what happened here made very sure they never would.
Number 5. Ocean X Baltic Sea Anomaly. In 2011, a team called Ocean X was scanning the floor of the Baltic Sea when their sonar returned a shape that didn't belong. A perfectly round object, 60 meters across, with a domed top and what looked like carved steps leading up to it. Trailing behind it was a 300-meter scar gouged into the seabed, as if the thing had skidded into position. To put 60 meters in perspective, that is wider than a Boeing 747 is long, sitting alone in the dark at the bottom of the sea. The argument over what it is has never stopped. Scientists call it a natural formation, a chunk of granite and basalt shaped by ancient glaciers grinding across the rock. But the divers who actually went down there came back with claims that fueled every conspiracy imaginable. The detail that nobody can explain away is what they said happened to their gear. Cameras and satellite phones died the instant they came within range of the structure, then flickered back to life the moment they pulled away. Glaciers do not knock out electronics. Granite does not switch your camera off and on. So the strangely geometric edges, the staircase cut into the dome, the 300-meter skid mark, and the dead instruments all sit there together, and every single expedition that has gone back down has come up holding a bigger question than the one it carried in.
Number 4. SS Airfield. A massive ship sits rotting in Homebush Bay near Sydney, and a forest is growing out of its hull. The SS Airfield was a steel steamer built over a century ago, used to haul supplies during the Second World War. And when her working life ended, she was sent to a shipbreaking yard to be torn apart for scrap. But the dismantling stopped halfway. The yard shut down, and the half-broken hulls of several ships were simply left where they sat, abandoned in the shallow water of the bay. Then, nature did something nobody planned. Seeds drifted into the rusted, open hull of the airfield, took root in the sediment that collected inside, and grew. Today, a dense tangle of mangrove trees rises straight out of the corroded steel, a floating green island shaped exactly like a ship, branches reaching toward the sky, where cargo cranes once swung. The contrast is staggering. Cold industrial metal built to wage war, now cradling a living forest that gets thicker every year. Photographers travel from around the world to capture it at sunset, when the silhouette looks like something out of a dream. The roots are slowly tearing the hull apart from the inside, which means the ship that refused to die is being dismantled after all, just not by the men who were paid to do it.
Number 3. Yugoslav Submarine Base, Montenegro. Hidden inside the solid rock of the Lustica Peninsula on the coast of Montenegro, there is a network of tunnels carved deep enough to swallow entire submarines whole. The Yugoslav Navy blasted this base out of the mountain during the Cold War, a secret stronghold where attack subs could slip in from the Adriatic, vanish underground, and rearm completely out of sight of satellites and spy planes. From the open sea, you would never know it was there. Just a cliff face and a couple of dark openings at the waterline that look like ordinary caves, until you steer a boat inside and the rock opens into vast flooded chambers built to hide weapons of war. The scale is hard to process. These tunnels were cut tall and wide enough that a full-size submarine could float straight in and disappear, the same way you would pull a car into a garage, except the garage is buried inside a mountain, and the car is a steel killing machine longer than a building. After Yugoslav tore itself apart, the base lost its purpose and was abandoned to the dark and the dripping water. Today, divers and kayakers drift through the silent passages, their voices echoing off walls that were once the deadliest secret on this coastline. The deeper you go, the colder and blacker it gets, and somewhere in that maze are chambers the explorers still haven't fully mapped.
Zhangjiakou Dragon Skeleton. Residents of a city in China stumbled onto something that detonated across the internet overnight. An 18-meter skeleton with a massive skull, front and rear limbs, and a long tapering tail, laid out in full. 18 meters is roughly the length of 2 city buses parked end to end, and this thing was a single spine of bone. The footage spread like wildfire, and viewers immediately saw what looked like a dragon torn straight out of fantasy television, the resemblance so strong that comparisons to the creatures from Game of Thrones were everywhere within hours. But the locals pushed back hard against that reading. To them, this wasn't some Western fantasy beast. It was a Chinese dragon, they insisted, pointing to one crucial detail: the creature had no wings. In Chinese mythology, the dragon is a serpentine river god, a being of water and sky that doesn't need wings to fly, and the skeleton's long-limbed, wingless body fit that ancient image far more closely than any movie monster. So the debate split right down a cultural fault line, 2 completely different civilizations looking at the same pile of bones and seeing the legend each had grown up with. What the skeleton actually was, where it came from, whether it was a real find or a constructed display, all of that got buried under the argument about which myth it belonged to. And then the footage went quiet, leaving the bones in a kind of limbo no museum ever claimed.
The sealed room. A man squeezed through a strange crack in the ground, the kind of opening most people would walk right past, and lowered himself into the dark to see what was down there. What he found has haunted everyone who's seen the footage since. The space they know was filthy, cramped, and wrong in a way that's hard to put into words. A grimy underground room with a single chair sitting in the middle of it, positioned exactly the way you'd place a chair if you needed to keep someone in it. Against the walls and across the floor, clothing lay scattered and discarded, items that clearly belonged to a person who was no longer there. The whole scene looked like the aftermath of something nobody is supposed to find. A place where a human being may have been held against their will and then was simply gone. There were no answers waiting down there. No note, no explanation. Just a sealed chamber that someone had gone to the trouble of hiding underground, fitted out with the one piece of furniture that turns an empty room into something far more sinister. The explorer who found it didn't stay long, and who could blame him? Some doors, once you open them, you can't close again. And the worst part is this: whoever built that room, whoever used it, whoever left those clothes behind, was never found. The crack in the ground is still out there, and nobody knows how many more rooms like it are waiting under our feet, sealed up, patient, holding secrets that were never meant to surface.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.